The live chat.
The live chat, and we can see if anybody is anxiously awaiting our in-depth. What? No, I don't want you to pull up images for me. Man, awesome. Apparently, Kate's computer pulled up images for me.
Nice. Boy, okay. It's good stuff to get on the recording.
Yeah, it is. Problems I have with my daughter's computer. Now on the long view.
Yeah. Well, you're sitting there like talking about your tech problems, and I'm sitting here just burping, just letting them fly. Boom.
Yeah, you got that dead hollow gaze. Yeah, we're talking about an LCG. I got Game of Thrones. No one plays with me. I don't know why. Why?
Yeah.
Oh, that is interesting. I've always wondered why they went with the second edition to that game. Do you think it was just to get more people into playing it, or?
Yeah, it got me into it. Like the first edition got to be a huge mess. Like they introduced a like a card effect that was called like Moribund, and so like characters would be in this sort of like not dead but not alive state.
Oh, like a zombie?
I guess, but not really. Like I don't know how else to say it than just like it was a really dumb effect, and it sounds like it made for some very confusing and frustrating like rules, I guess.
So they just revamped the whole thing. Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I never played the first one, but Trent did, and that was kind of his take on it, was that like, you know, the card pool had gotten a little unwieldy, and it's pretty common for, you know, like there to be a second edition. There's been rumblings about whether or not there's going to be a second edition for like Lord of the Rings, a card game.
Yeah, my impression is that the second edition is going to be when they do the online implementation of that game.
Yeah,
because I saw the announcement that was going to be a digital card game. I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm assuming they're going to charge you for imaginary packs of cards like Hearthstone does. Yeah. Which, yeah. You know, that's again, I like to talk about this generational divide with my children, and that's one of them. Oh, I can buy all this stuff, but why? It's like a mask for a DLC for $2. It's you don't even really have it. It's okay. Really want to spend your allowance on that? Okay.
Yeah. Oh, like I'm definitely on the older generation divide for that, because I like the idea that these game companies are supporting themselves off of like people buying imaginary clothing.
Yeah.
To me is like it's laughable. Like it is just all around like hilarious.
Yeah, and like some of these I was like, what is it? Was Star Wars Battlefront, where you bought loot boxes? It's just like here's some money. Maybe I'll get something, maybe I won't. Okay.
Yeah. It got like the most. That was like the most downvoted comment, I think, like of all time.
That doesn't surprise me. I've heard similar things. But I'm sure the game still made money, so.
Yep.
Hey, Norm's on. Hey, Norm.
Yo, Norm. We're gonna get Ryan. Ryan's coming on to talk about Castle Burgundy, dude. I just gotta set it up at some point. Yeah.
That would be nice. I'm rather fond of that. That's a nice
Seriously?
I like Castles of Burgundy, yeah.
I think I like Castles of Burgundy a little bit less now.
I have other field games I enjoy, but Castles of Burgundy is not a bad one.
Yeah.
I still like the evilness that is in the Year of the Dragon, but you know, it's funny. I guess maybe I'm just a moody gamer, because there's sometimes I just want to be like just in your face in the game. Other times I'm like, let's just sit back and build stuff. Man, that sounds fun tonight, you know.
Yeah.
And the only thing that Castles of Burgundy that I always mess up when I play, but it's because the chits are so tiny, so you can't have like more than one of the same building in an area. And like I inevitably messed that up. I looked down, I'm like, oh, well, hang on. I think these two are the same, but they're so yeah, guys. 4 rounds ago when I did this, I built 2 of the same building.
Yeah, it's a pretty important part of the game. Mm-hmm. I usually play it online, so I don't have to deal with like rules mistakes and stuff. You know, like you can't cheat in an online game. Like Yukata has an excellent one of those.
Hi.
Hey, Trent.
Hey.
How are you this fine evening?
Norm is here, and he says he still hasn't played Notre Dame. Feld.
What?
The classic Feld. I guess that one's. I know it's like the most classic of his lighter games, I would say. Is there any game that you can think of that'd be a lighter Feld game that's has as much traction as that one?
I don't know. I mean, the biggest complaint here about Notre Dame is that it's a mean game, and I don't get it. I'm like,
no, it's not at all. It's not a mean game.
You know, I mean, unless you played Year of the Dragon, I haven't played Year of the Dragon. I can see why you might think that, but
people they freak out about the rats because I mean, even like experienced players, at some point you just like decide during a round that you're just like, I'm not gonna worry about rats. I'm gonna get hit by it. And then, you know, usually it's a penalty that you can withstand a hit or two from the rats. Because it doesn't matter like how bad you get the plague; it's just whether or not you get plague or not. Bora Bora is, from what I understand, his heaviest game that people. I've played it before. I enjoyed it.
It's definitely his heaviest from everything I've ever played.
Mm-hmm. I think it gets compared to like Trajan, Aquaspheres in that realm. Definitely not the Merlin game, whatever that one was.
That sucked.
The roll and move.
That was really bad.
Like if you say that it's a roll and move, it's way better than most roll and moves. But yeah, it's
That's funny. I haven't heard of it, and like everything I heard is like, whoa, TC, you might want to think twice about that one.
I don't think you'd hate it that bad. It has a really bad form of randomness though. Like a pretty like every round you're going to get 3 of these things dealt to you, 3 invaders, and they're like 4 or 5 different colors. I forget exactly how many. Maybe there's 6, but if you get 2 that are the same, like it's just way easier to defend against an invasion, and it's like disproportionately easier.
Well, but I've always found with Feld, I enjoy some of his older designs. You know, I don't know, when I got those 10th anniversary reprints of Notre Dame in the Year of the Dragon, I just like. You know, I think I got my 3 Feld games I want on my shelf. I think I got them right there. Castles, Year of the Dragon, and Notre Dame. Like right there. Bam.
Fair enough, man. Now you're just having to make space for all these living card games, huh?
Yeah, and Rosenberg. I need to get at least a few Rosenbergs on my shelf just to counterbalance all these GMT games I have on the other side, right?
Yeah.
I just got to figure out which at least I want to get 2 of them. You know, I'm leaning heavily towards Agricola because I like how punishing that game can be if you're not on top of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just played that again for the first time in like a long time 2 nights ago, and man, it just it's something special. It's something I don't get to play hardly enough, but it is a hostile environment, yeah. And I love everything about like how difficult things come, and how whenever there's a window left open, you know, a door left open for you by an opponent, you just kind of got to step through and
do what you got to do.
Yeah, I had 5 people in that game when nobody else had their third.
Oh,
yep.
So Trent, you ready to get some L5R on tonight?
Yes.
TC's hosting. TC's gonna like have the reins and do the call to start and whatnot. So,
yep. I'm assuming you're. I probably don't even ask this, but you're probably all caught up on the every single cycle and clan deck, and anxiously awaiting the new 6x6 cycle that's getting ready to hit us.
Well, as best I can, yes.
I'm feeling
pretty good about the meta right now. Yeah.
Okay. How you feel? I'm really curious how you feel about like the restricted, the.
I have thoughts. Don't you worry.
Excellent. And I'm even insofar as I've got the novella. Ooh, look at that.
I kind of wanted to get that, but I haven't picked it up yet.
My daughter actually wants to run an L5R campaign in the use the role playing system. So I got her the book, and I got the core book rule book on the way. So we'll see how that turns out, because she loves the lore of this game, and she's kind of distanced herself from the card game, but she still likes playing Battle for Rokugan, and she really, really likes the lore of this. So that'll be an interesting topic of discussion too.
Definitely.
And then we got Joe, who's only played it once. We can get if we got the Stockholm newbie syndrome. Like, oh, it's so much. I don't know. Oh my god.
Well, I mean, I definitely will have like input. I know I would say that the structural differences from other Fantasy Flight Living card games, came across to me in that one game. But a lot of the nuances I'm not gonna have.
I don't think anyone got most of the nuances.
That's most of my question is going to be like, I mean, we'll get into it, but like with the amount, like the types of decisions that you have to make in this game and how much impact each one has, if you can catch like a read of what your opponent's trying to do, chances are you have something you can do about it, at your disposal, because you're not really, I mean, you've got so many cards and there's like no card limit. No hand limit. You can just like be like, I want to draw 5 cards this turn, and as long as you can, take that honor hit, you can end up sitting there with, out of a 40 card deck, you're drawing an 1/8 of it in a single turn, and that's like how the game usually opens.
Yep, depends on how well you can read your opponent and how much honor loss you're willing to gain just by cranking that honor dial up.
By 3 turns, I mean, like theoretically, is there a shuffle mechanic in this game?
There is. If you have to reshuffle, you lose honor. I'm not entirely sure how much honor you lose. 5?
Yep.
Woo, that's still pretty big.
But it's not like you can't like just, like milling through an opponent's deck will not just make them deck out and lose. Like they still have to have, it's not just like a death sentence like it is in many other games.
No, but if they're sitting on 3 honor and you're getting ready to deck them, you got them in a corner.
I mean, you're talking like 7 turns in, and you've now drawn so many cards potentially. I mean, if you're, I don't know, but this is just if you're drawing 5 per turn, which you're not drawing 5 per turn. Anyway, it'll be interesting. We'll get into it.
Sweet. So Trent, I'm going to try to keep this at an hour, so we'll be done at 8:30 because I know it's really late for you guys. So
okay, sounds good.
Okay, so let's kick this off and we'll get going. I'm just going to wing it, but I have a lot I'm excited to talk about, and I think it'll be a good episode. I'm really excited to get to an up on the long view because, like I was telling Joe earlier, I don't see a whole lot of coverage for this game anymore, which I think's I'm not. We'll get into it maybe. I'm not entirely sure why, but I think that it should be getting more talking about personally.
So let's do that.
All right. So here we go. Now we'll do what I call the Long Joe countdown. 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Long View. How should I do this, Joe?
Your countdown wasn't.
No, it wasn't good.
There wasn't enough.
Okay, I got it. Sorry, I lost my piece of paper.
You need to make everybody wonder, like, seriously, like, why does he wait this long?
Okay, here we go. Okay. Okay, let's try this again. Round 2. Sorry, Norm. I'll get this down.
A swing and a miss.
Woo, foul ball. Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to a new episode of The Long View, where we take a closer look at the games people play. The Long View is proudly sponsored by Game Surplus, which you've heard at the beginning of this episode in the beginning. Game Surplus is a great place to get your games. Be sure to go there and get stuff that's out of print, blah, 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 blah. Carmen's great and awesome. It's great. Shop there. It's good. It's awesome. There. Done. Anything to add to that, Joe? Because I know Game Surplus is great.
Well, if you say enough words, there's no way I can say anything back.
Okay, here we go. It's great.
No, the Game Surplus is their place where you should go find your online board games. Don't forget that the Longview has a coupon code. So for games that get covered in the Longview, we are in constant communication with Carmen to put up the games that we talk about on the Longview as you get 10% off at Game Surplus, because these are games people have been playing for a while that we talked about in the Longview. Today's got an interesting game at its core that we're talking about that's kind of new and old at the same time. But anyway, yeah, the types of classics that we talk about in the Longview, just know that we're not going to talk about the games unless they're there for somebody. So you can find those on the podcast picks at gamesurplus.com. Just
Which
click
is
on
important
podcast picks there.
Because if you really like this game we're talking about, you're going to need a discount as much as possible, because this game is quite the money sink. So tonight I have my good friend Joe joining us, my co-host from. Hello, Joe. Nice to see you. And I'm very excited that another co-host from a podcast we do, The Good More Ugly, got Trent Hamm on tonight.
Hello.
And this is really exciting because I think a large part me and Trent have kind of bonded over this game. We're going to be talking about The Legend of the Five Rings. Now, maybe it's kind of contentious that we're doing this as a long view episode, since this game technically hasn't been out a year in its new iteration, but it is a re-implementation of an older game, which is a collectible card game that I believe AEG put out several years ago.
I can talk about the CCG at length because I used to play it.
Oh, we have a former. See, I do not have any experience with this except fond memories of people who I play the new game with who reminisce about it. So please, Trent, as we go into Legend of the Five Rings, tell us what it used to be.
Okay, just let me monologue here for a moment or two. L5R was a collectible card game for 20 years before it was a living card game. It was in print from 1985, so it was one of the initial competitors of Magic the Gathering, all the way until 2005 or 2015. It was initially made by AEG, and they published, I believe, the first set or two, and then they sold it to another. They spun off a company that was supposed to manage all of the Legend of the Five Rings stuff. That includes like the RPG and all the other stuff. They called this company Five Rings Publishing Group, and it was FRPG for short. That was when I was playing the game, as in one of the first editions of the game, and I'll go back to what I mean by that. I think it was Jade Edition, but I can't remember for sure. I can't remember the names of all the editions these days. It's been so long. That was Jade Edition, I'm pretty sure. That was when I was playing back then. But I'll get back to what I mean by an edition. Then a couple years after that, FRPG basically got completely purchased by Wizards of the Coast. So from 1997 until about 2001-ish, 4-year gap there, Wizards of the Coast was making L5R alongside Magic. They were making both games, which seems kind of weird. I would say that L5R probably over the long term, other than Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, maybe, has been one of the bigger competitors of Magic, and it's definitely been one of the longest lasting ones. So it's kind of funny to think that Wizards used to actually print and make L5R for a while. In 2001, AEG bought back L5R and proceeded to run it themselves until 2015. Okay, so the game itself is a CCG by starters that were usually pre-made, and you buy random boosters, and they had a booster draft version and all. I mean, this is your typical collectible card game. When they released it in editions, I guess would be the right way to put it. The kind of like cycles. But what it would be is an edition would be a core set, so it'd be like a large CCG set with like 300 different cards, and then a bunch of little expansions that told a story related to it. And an edition would last 2 to 3 years, and then there'd be a new edition. So like it'd be like a first edition, second edition, third edition, fourth edition, and then like little expansions for each edition. The game was basically the same from edition to edition. They would change a few rules in each edition, but the game was basically always backwards compatible. Between a couple of the editions, they changed the face design, but they've also done that in Magic, so it was a similar type of thing. The cards are still all basically intercompatible, but the face looked a little bit different. And I played during Jade Edition a little bit. Jade Edition was in around 1997. That was when Wizards of the Coast had started printing it, and that's how I got interested. It hadn't been carried in my area until Wizards took it over. because the local shop in my area carried everything Wizards of the Coast. They carried Netrunner and Jihad / Vampire the Eternal Struggle.
Oh my god, I haven't heard about Jihad in forever.
Yeah, all of those games.
Yeah.
So L5R was another Wizard CCG, so they carried it as well. That's how I started to get into it. So I played a lot during Jade Edition back then, and the thing I remember most, I mean, you're talking about me playing a CCG for 2 years, like 20 or 25 years ago. It was a long time ago. But the thing I remember most is that the game felt really complicated and swingy, but the theme was really good. I also felt that the card fronts were butt ugly, to be pardon my French. I thought the card design of the original L5R cards was ugly. Really ugly.
Now I have to go look it up.
But I enjoyed the game. I actually thought the game was quite fun. There was this, I'd say it was probably the third most popular CCG in the area when Wizards was doing it. And so I played it for a few years. I played a lot of CCGs in college. That was kind of my thing. And I kind of faded out, especially after Wizards sold it off back to AEG. I stopped playing it. Then I went to Gen Con in 2011, I believe it was. And on a whim, I played in an L5R sealed tournament when they were bringing out, I believe it was Emperor Edition. I think they were doing like release events for Emperor Edition. And I played in like the sealed event for that, and I did really well in it. And the prize I won was this box set. It was called a Jimpuku box set. And what it was is it had a really well done pre-constructed deck for each of the 9 clans in it. And it was packaged wonderfully. They did a really deluxe job packaging it. It looked beautiful. It looked like a board game box, and you take the lid off. And then individually in it, we'd have there were 9 clans at the time, which was just like colors or factions. And each one of them had their own deck inside with their nice logos on it. It looked really beautiful. And that got me back into playing it a little bit. I played it a little bit then. I mostly just playing the various pre-constructed decks against each other. When I went to the sealed tournament, I was mostly relying on my old knowledge to do well, and it worked out reasonably well, because I think other people were even more old school than I, or hadn't played it in a long time as well. I think it was a bunch of people fumbling around, and I happened to do okay. So I played it a little bit during that edition, and that would have been like 7th or 8th edition in comparison to like Magic or something else. It had been out for 15 years at that point. And I played it, and I started, and no one around here really played it other than playing a few decks to humor me out of my box set, and kind of faded away then again. And then in 2015, AEG decided we're done with all L5R stuff, the RPG, the CCG, everything. We're done with all of it. We're selling a whole shebang, all of the IP to Fantasy Flight Games.
Yeah, that was a huge shebang. I remember when they announced that, people were losing their mind on that.
So as soon as they announced it, Fantasy Flight said, we're going to remake L5R as an LCG, which means it's going to be not collectible anymore, but it's still going to be a card game. We're also doing an RPG based on. They announced that right off the bat. But it was like a 2 years of lead where they didn't do anything. They just had announced this in 2015, and then nothing came out for 2 years. And that's where we get to the LCG.
Yeah, in the previous edition, I remember seeing, I have a buddy who also played the previous edition, except he had this weird box set called The Art of War, which
was like a board game, yeah.
Yeah, they tried to take the collectible card game and make it into like a multiplayer game, and it was really strange. Have you ever tried that thing?
Yes, I have. It's odd.
Yeah, okay, and then I think he was in the same boat you were. He's like, it kind of faded out, and then they made this big announcement, right? It's LCG thing. And around the same time, they announced that Warhammer Conquest was ending, and a few people I know who really into that were looking for their next big LCG to get into. And then this thing hit, and we all bought into it. So, when what was this last year? I think it was this game. Yeah,
Fantasy Flight released this at Gen Con last year, 2017.
Yes. Yeah. And it made a pretty big splash. I mean, people were getting into it. What really caught my attention in particular was a lot of the original L5R players really took to this. They said, this is a really good implementation. It fixed a lot of the problems that apparently the last iteration had. Can you go into like some of the problems you heard about that? And so what the Fantasy Flight edition presumably corrected?
Okay, so where do I even start with this? The basic idea of the game is still the same. If you look at like the 50,000 foot view, or lack of a better way, the game looks similar. You have 2 decks. You have a Destiny deck and a Conflict deck. You have provinces out on the table that have face down cards on them. That's all of that's the same. You're trying to fight other players to kill their provinces. That's the same. But once you get past that, there's a lot of rules changes. Lots of stuff has changed. There really wasn't. You won the game before by just killing all 4 of the provinces. Once a province was killed, it didn't refill anymore. It was just permanently dead. That means you got fewer and fewer cards out of your.
That's right.
So it just like continued to cinch you as you were losing. Like
yes.
Like I heard that once that started going, then it was pretty much a downhill slide, and you couldn't recover from it. I do remember hearing that was one of the complaints. Yes,
there were a couple factions that were designed to get around that and accept a couple province losses and still be fine. Unicorn was that was kind of their big gimmick back then, if I remember right. But that was a big change. Characters would die in conflicts. If you had a character, rather than just bowing and going home at the end of the conflict, the way it works now, your character just died if you lost the conflict.
Okay.
Wow.
So like you get these absurd conflicts where everybody has all their dudes in it, and then like one guy's entire side would be dead, and then like the game's functionally over at that point.
Yeah, there's just no reason to keep going. Okay.
Some people like that. It was thematically fun, I guess. I mean, if you think about it thematically, it's like we win the battle, we slaughter all of your people. Thematically, that kind of makes some visual sense if you imagine it being a very vicious world. But it didn't make for the best game. I didn't think. I enjoyed playing it, but that was a very frustrating element of the game. Is you just felt like you build up and you build up and you just be wiped out, and felt very empty to me anyway. Yeah. The thing AEG always did well with this is the universe of Rokugan, which is the world in which all the L5R stuff takes place, the CCG, the LCG, the RPG, all of it, takes place in a world that's very thematically rich. It's got a long storyline. They did put so much effort into building out the world behind it and the story. They did a lot of their major tournaments for the CCG literally affected card development for the future. There was all kinds of stuff like that went on, and it developed a very loyal following because I think it was all the efforts of AEG in doing that. Like I would go to events at Gen Con, their big tournaments there, and it'd be like 100 people in it. And like other small LCG or CCGs would not have nearly that many people.
Yeah, maybe that was a big incentive for fans to like to pick this up because of the rabid, passionate fan base this has. So we fast forward to last year. We have a new Legends of the Five Rings card game. And it does appear that Fantasy Flight is taking the initiative in keeping the lore going, keeping the tournaments going that affect the storyline. My daughter is super into the storyline. If she was here, she could tell you all about what's going on, what the last tournament did, the Lion Honor, and how it's affecting Crane. She's like super into this. But before we get any further, let's just discuss what the game is now and how it plays. So Trent, if you feel up to it, you want to describe how the basics, we don't have to get into like super details, but kind of like the basic flow of the game goes when you're playing and how it generally goes.
Okay. As I mentioned, you have these 4 provinces in front of you with each game. And you also have a 5th province that's a special one. And the special one's called the Stronghold. Okay. So what you do is you have these 5 province cards that you've chosen. You've constructed your decks before the game. You have a conflict deck and a dynasty deck, and the dynasty deck is mostly characters almost entirely, and the conflict deck is a mixed bag of stuff. If you've ever played Magic, the way to think of it is that the dynasty deck has all of your characters in it, all of your creatures in it from Magic, all of your summon spells, and your conflict deck has all of your fast effects in it, all instants and interrupts and all that stuff,
or as I like to call them, the shenanigans.
Yeah. Exactly. The whole shenanigans. It also has a few creatures in it, so you can think of it in Magic's terms. It'd be like a character with flash. Like if you play it from your conflict deck, you can just immediately put it into play without waiting until the right time. You don't have to wait until your turn to do it. You can just kind of throw it down. So that's kind of how this is. Like all your fast effects are in one deck, all your non-fast effects are in another deck. If you're thinking in terms of Magic terms, you also at the start of a game have these 5 provinces. These 5 provinces, you lay them face down on the table. You choose one of them. You know which one it is. You get to choose. It's not random. And that's your stronghold. And the top of your stronghold, you put down a special card. It's your stronghold card. It makes this particular province better. And it also means that this province can't be attacked until near the very end of the game. The other provinces are going to be attacked much earlier in the game. All of these provinces are face down. Your stronghold is face up. Okay. So the way the game starts is on your other 4 provinces that aren't strongholds, you're laying cards face down on them from your dynasty deck. Those are the ones that are basically all your characters. They're equivalent to like summon spells and magic, like I said, if you're familiar with magic. And so the start of a round, you're taking turns bringing out these guys off of that. You get the resources used in this game is called Fate, and your stronghold card tells you how much Fate you get per round. You don't lose excess Fate at the end of a round. You get to keep it. It never goes away unless you spend it. So when you're bringing out a guy during the dynasty phase, which is the first part, you're pulling them in off your province, and you're saying, okay, this guy costs 2 Fate, and then you have a decision to make. You can spend more Fate and literally put it on the card, and that is basically how many turns it's going to survive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So, like, let's say you bring out a guy, you just pay 2, you don't put any on it, he's going to die at the end of the round no matter what you do. Well, I mean, there's always a trick, but generally he's going to die at the end of the round unless you pull out a trick. If you decide to put a Fate on him, he's going to live this round and next round. You put 2 Fate on it, this round and the next 2 rounds. You get the idea. At the end of the round, basically, you kill everybody that doesn't have a Fate on it and take a Fate off of everybody else. So you always have a decision to make with your resources. It's like, how much am I going to invest in this particular dude, basically?
And I think that's a good, I mean, you call it Fate, but there are resources, and it's a nice little thematic trick they pull with the game. It's like, you know, it's Fate to bring out a character, right? But it's essentially you're managing your resources. So I think that's a nice little thematic trick the game pulls.
Yeah, Fate is your resource. And like I said, thus far in the game, everybody always gets 7 resources per round. I think that will change in the future. I think there will be...
Yeah, with new strongholds. Yeah.
There are going to be stuff, I'm sure, where they play with that, because they don't put numbers like that on cards without being able to play with them at some point. That's the part of the fun of it. But anyway, you have those resources, and each round you use them. The remainder will stay in your pool. Once everybody's done putting the guys out, and you're alternating putting your guys out, but the first one to pass gets a free Fate as a bonus for passing first. But then when you're all done passing, then you do an honor bid. You have these little dials that have numbers 1 through 5 on them.
Yeah, and this is the brilliant part of the game. I love this part.
I like this too. One of the main things you use to keep score in the game is called honor. You start off with a certain number of honors, between about 10 and 12 most of the time.
Yeah, or Scorpion, and you go with S, because you're just honorable. Yeah, we all know about Scorpion.
Basically, if you have 25 honor at any point in the game, you win the game. If you ever have 0 honor, your opponent wins the game. So you're trying to get your honor as high as possible, generally. If you mess around and get yourself in that hole, it could be very painful for you, and you have a good chance of ending up going to 0. So you have to do some management of your honor, and this is where the next phase of the game becomes important. You have these honor dials, and you privately, each player bids a number between 1 and 5 on them. Okay, so choose your number, you lay it face down, you simultaneously reveal. That's how many cards you're going to draw off of your conflict deck, is the number you reveal. But you take whoever has the bigger number, and then you subtract the other player's smaller number from it, and the person with the bigger number has to pay the person with the smaller number that much honor.
Yeah, and that's huge, because as Joe, we were talking about earlier, there's no really card limit in your hand, but what you're trying to mitigate is you're just like, how much do I want the cards in my hand versus how much I think my opponent's going to just suck my honor away if I dial this thing all the way up to 5. Yep. That is such a clever way of managing a hand size without setting a hard hand limit, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you essentially have a soft hand limit in effect by your honor pool.
Yeah.
But it's not a hard hand limit. It's like, it's within the game. You kind of... There's no real hand limit, but you're effectively hand limited, because you can't just bid 5 every round or you will lose.
Yeah, you'll just be like, your opponent will be like, oh, he's going to bid 5 every round. 1, 4 honor. Like, you're done.
Yeah. Or, I mean, they're gaining 4 honor every round, and then they can be like, play Way of the Chrysanthemum and just win. Way of the Chrysanthemum gives you a bunch of bonus honor, basically.
Yeah.
So you got to be careful around with the honor bid. There's a lot of like, well, what's he going to do? How much is he going to bid? A lot of times what I do, and I'll go ahead and say what my strategy is, a lot of times, unless I'm playing Scorpion, I will bid 5 the first round, almost always. I want to get a big fistful of cards in my hand. Then after that, I'm more careful.
Yeah. That I've seen that happen a lot, but I usually play Scorpion, so you know how they, again, we'll get into the different factions. So but so far I just want to iterate, with this game, there are so many decision points, and we're just going through like the first 2 steps of this game, and there's already like several decision points you already have to make as a player, considering your point, before you even get into the battle of this game, which we are going to hit here pretty quick.
Yeah, right about now. Okay, so the main part of this is the conflict phase, and that's the real meat of this game. Everything else to this point has been setting up for it, more or less. So, during this part, there's a first player token that's passed around, and the first player gets to declare a conflict first. There are two types of conflicts that they're functionally the same. The only difference is which number it uses on the cards, because every card in the game that stays on the table has a number that representing military skill or political skill. So you're going to be able to declare a conflict that's either type military or type political. During the conflict phase, each player is going to get to declare one conflict of each type, but you're going to take turns. The first player chooses a military or political conflict. Then the second player chooses a military or political conflict back. Then when it comes back to you, you have to choose the other type you haven't done yet. So if you've done political, you have to do military, and vice versa. And then the other player is the same deal. So in essence, there are going to be 4 conflicts in a normal 2-player game. And we'll get into multiplayer at the very end of this. But
yeah, well, that was just announced. That's like a beta right now.
Yes. We'll get back to that one in a bit. But so that's how a normal game works. The way conflicts works, and this right here will show you how many decision points are in this game. This is fantastic. So out in the middle of the table in front of you, there are these 5 rings, okay? The legend of the 5 rings. So
weird.
Unsurprisingly, 5 rings. Yeah. They represent 5 elements: air, earth, fire, water, and what's the one I'm forgetting?
Void, I think.
Void, yeah.
Yeah, void. Void's the one I was forgetting. I was thinking the obvious 4 elements, and void's the 5th. Each one of these elements has a special game effect related to each one of these rings. I'm not going to get into them, but suffice it to say that they have an impact on the game state, each one of them. They'll affect the amount of fate on characters, they'll affect cards in your hand, they'll make you discard, and different things like that. So what you do when you declare a conflict is you choose one of those 5 rings, you choose whether it's going to be military or political. Nicely, these rings are double-sided. One side looks as the military red color, and the other side is political blue color. And then you have to choose one of their 4 provinces you're attacking. So you have 3 decisions to make before you even declare what you're going to do with your attacker. And then you put that token over there, say I'm declaring attack against this province, and you declare who you're doing it with. So you push up some number of your guys depending on what you want to do. So let's say you're doing a military conflict against one of their provinces. You're probably going to want to send forth at least a guy or 2 with high military numbers, or else what's the point? You want to win it. I mean, why else are you doing it?
Yeah.
So you push that token forward, and then if you don't know what that province is you're attacking, like I said, the game starts with them face down. They flip it face up, and it feels a lot like Netrunner at this point, honestly. But they flip that province face up, and it has some sort of effect on it. A lot of times the effects are, when revealed, do this nasty thing, and it's usually something you're not happy about as the attacker.
It'll be like a revelation where it happens immediately. It's an action where they can just trigger it on their turn. Yeah.
There's always a risk in going forward with it. Now, there are a couple characters in the game that will help you mitigate that risk. Cautious Scout lets you basically counter any when revealed effects when they flip over. There's a couple things that let you peek at provinces and stuff if you're really scared. But those cards generally don't get played because they're not worth the cost involved to find it out. Most people just go in, I'll just take whatever this is and accept it.
Yeah.
Okay. So they've got their province flipped over. It may have an ability on it that they can use. It may have any number of things you don't know. It's a trap. But the thing it will have is it'll have a strength number on it. That number will be 3, 4, 5, somewhere in that range. And the important thing about a strength number is, for you to break that province and defeat it, you have to win that conflict by at least that number. So if TC flips over a province and it has a 4 on it, I'm going to have to win that conflict by 4 in order to break it and just basically defeat it and turn it upside down.
And that's in addition to any defenders I bring out. Yeah.
So TC is going to bring out defenders, probably.
And generally you want to, because if you don't commit to a battle, guess what? You lose honor.
Yeah, you lose an honor if you don't commit somebody to a battle. So you bring out defenders, and then starting with the person defending, you can do fast effects. You take turns doing them. And that means anything that's out of in your conflict hand can be played at this point. A lot of those cards cost 0, which means that you have a lot to worry about all the time in this game. There's always tricks that can be doing. There are neutral 0 cost cards that go in pretty much every deck, and those are going to mess up your numbers. Like Ornate Fan adds 2 to military and it costs nothing, or 2 to political and costs nothing.
And there's a sword that does the opposite.
Fine Katana adds 2 to military and cost nothing. Those can come out of any deck and they cost nothing. So you got to always anticipate that the one might show up. You just have to account for it. And there's all kinds of different effects, but each of the individual clans have certain kinds of effects you can kind of expect from them, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So you can kind of have some idea of what might be coming. You kind of have a good feeling of it, but you don't always know exactly what they have in hand because it's, they're drawing cards. You go back and forth. Eventually the conflict's resolved. Someone wins. If the attacker has more than the defender, they get to keep the ring and get whatever the special effect is of that ring, like I mentioned earlier. Like if you win a void conflict and you're the attacker, you get to take a fate off of one of the other player's characters, which is pretty nasty effect. It can change all their plans. And then all the rings have different effects. But the winner, the person with the most power of that type of conflict claims it. And if you're the attacker and you get it, you get that ring effect. If you're the defender and you win it, you just get to take the ring.
But it's still important.
It's still important. We'll get to why it's important in a little bit to take the ring. If you manage to win by more than that, the province number, you get to flip that province upside down. That's really important. You want to break provinces because another way to win this game, the other way, is to break 3 of the provinces, which means you flip them face down or upside down, basically. Then you can attack their stronghold, which is like basically a super powerful province. The stronghold usually adds a bonus to that number on the province, so you're often having to win by 7 or 8 to break their stronghold. And when you break the stronghold, you just win the game.
Yep.
So you're wanting to break provinces. It isn't necessary, vital, but it's pretty good. You're gonna. That's kind of your goal on as an attacker.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say another aspect of this whole conflict is everybody that is in a conflict at the end of it, they basically tap. And this game is called Go Home Bowed. They use the word bowed instead of tap, but it's the same effect. It basically means you can really no longer use them in other conflicts unless you have some sort of neat trick.
Or shenanigan.
Yeah, you need a sort of neat trick. And then the conflicts pass back and forth. Both players are doing them. And so I do a military, TC would do a political. I do a political, TC would do a military. You can also pass if you don't have very many guys.
Yeah.
Then we've done...
Yeah, passing as the attacker does not cost you honor, though.
Yeah.
So that's a nice thing.
If you don't think you can attack and it's not worthwhile and you're afraid your province is going to get broken and the other guy attacks, there's nothing wrong with passing in this game. Nothing at all. In fact, a lot of times that's what you're going to want to do. And just give up one of your conflicts. But sometimes you got to do what you got to do. So all this is done. We've done these conflicts. Each of us have won a couple rings. Maybe a province has been broken. Okay, we're all done with all of our conflicts. We count up.
We got through that.
Yep, we count up the number of rings that we've won. Plus, there's a number on each character called glory. It's a little number on the right-hand side. You count up the glory on everybody you have that isn't knelt or isn't bowed. And that's your favor number. I don't know what they have a term for it.
It's your imperial favor modifier, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and whichever player has a higher imperial favor modifier, I don't know the exact term they use for that. Whoever has that gets a card called the imperial favor. It gives them a bonus next round of either a +1 to everything military they do or +1 to everything political they do. If you're involved in a political conflict and you choose the political side, you get +1 to everything. It's a nice little bonus. It's not like an essential bonus, but it's a nice little kicker. It basically rewards people who are effective in battle, more or less, is what it is. It's a reward for them for next round. There are a lot of cards that require you to just spend that imperial favor and put it back into the neutral pile so neither player controls it. So those cards are really powerful, but they're usually tricky to cast because they require you to have gotten the imperial conflict.
Yeah, that was one of the focuses of that new cycle that came out. Because when the game first came out, people were like, +1, who gives a crap? But then that first cycle came out, like, dude, if you got the favor, you can just chuck it and do like this incredible stuff.
Yeah, that's a lot of decks now. They want to get the in favor just so they can chuck it to do something nasty.
Yeah, nasty is the key word there.
Then you just clean up. Like I said earlier, you kill everybody that doesn't have a fate. They go to the discard pile. You remove a fate from everybody else that's still in play, and you stand everybody back up, and then you move to the next round. And that's pretty much how L5R goes. You keep going through rounds until either someone hits 0 honor, someone hits 25 honor, or someone's stronghold gets broken.
It's obliterated, yeah. And as we discussed, just talking about this, one of the reasons I was rather fond of this game is I like that it's very procedural. right?
Mm-hmm.
And playing war games, I like that. For me, it's a comforting to have a procedure, right? You go step by step by step. And that was one of the really strong appeals for me for this was that procedure. Now, a lot of people don't like it. In fact, when we start talking about some of the negative aspects of this game, length and deck building does come into account. But going into it, it's a very procedural game. You need to follow step by step. So anybody who's listening to this wanting to know if they're really interested in it, just be aware. It's very procedural.
I would say though, like the fact that I've only played one game of this maybe makes it like, you know, I'm almost a new player here, so I guess maybe a 2 cents
Joe, new player.
Yeah, I've played the game once, and I do have knowledge, pretty in-depth knowledge of previous Fantasy Flight living card games, and I would say that just like if you play one collectible card game, there's going to be a lot of similarities in between them, right? And the living card games tend to have a lot of shared lineage or card effects, and the way that the procedures work in this, I mean, like, you know, you've got a part of your turn where you're putting cards out, and you've got a part of your turn where you're like, you know, sort of declaring what types of fight you want to have, and you know, like I never felt like I was on rails. I felt like it was just like, you know, this is the time in the round when this type of thing, you know, there's like very clear action windows.
Oh, yeah.
And when you've got like that sort of, and this is something that I had to learn just for living card games in general, like there's probably somewhere in the rule book, like an infographic that shows you like essentially with little blocks of you know, they usually do it like a block that'll say like, this is the action phase. And then you'll have like action window as a smaller box underneath it that tells you like, can I play cards right now or not? Because this is one of those games where like card effects are everything. And so like you need to understand the procedure before you go to like a competition, you know, like otherwise you're going to be like sitting there like pulling out a card and being like, hey, when can I play this? And that's not exactly something
and they'll be like, that was
like
4 windows ago, right? That's 4 windows.
Or they'll just be like, well, it's good to know that you have that because, you know, I've got this card that I wasn't sure if you had that or not. Now I know what I need to do.
And now I know I have it in your hand. So thanks for that inside knowledge. And another thing we're talking about, Trent, is like, so we described the procedure of this game and how to play it. And what I think is really, I don't know if lack of a word, really good, amazing about this game is that there are different ways to play this game depending on the clan you pick.
Oh, yes.
And
they
that
play very differently.
That really was when I started looking at this, I'm like, okay, so I got the structure. Now you just attack. You know, you got the lions. Okay, I get the lions. So they're all attack. And you got the crane, which is like a talk. But then you start getting these other clans, and they really can accommodate the type of game style you enjoy. So,
when you say talk, TC, do you mean like just essentially earning points without attacking?
Yeah, the blue points. You know,
yeah,
the talk.
The honor victory.
Yeah, that's kind of what Crane does. They're good at the political stuff.
Yeah, they're like the douchebags who like to talk a lot. You know, it's like,
that's
oh
right.
God, there goes Crane, and blah blah blah.
And now that I'm thinking about it again, like the game really doesn't change functionally much.
No,
like because like if you're doing a military conflict or political conflict, those are like mechanically identical.
Yeah.
The only difference will be what card effects will key off of them, right? So this is the difference though is that the game is not choosing what political, you know, like an entire realm of what political stuff does necessarily right off the bat. You're drafting those, like, you know, the 5 different rings, which are really what you're attaching the value of, like, okay, well, if I win this is what happens. Or if I don't lose this with you as the winner, like, I don't want you to get this effect, you know, because sometimes you're choosing something you don't want your opponent to get when you choose that.
Absolutely. You feel like if someone's hitting you with the void and you know they want that effect, because a void can like take off a fade off a character you want to hang around, you want to be sure you counteract that as fast as you can, because even though you don't get the ring effect, you're preventing it from executing on you.
If you have a huge character, like big characters are tough to play in this game, especially with how fixed income is. Yeah, that like just about every one of these effects can just have that sort of pinch point where it's like, oh no, I've left myself open to this, and you need to be able to consistently watch for that.
And if you want to know, I'd like to get pinched, play crab. Oh my goodness! But anyway, but
that's the way it sounds. Actually, maybe I'm sure that was intentional.
But you know, what I really like about this is like if you like games, and like for me, I like being the sneaky, underhanded, rotten guy, and that's my play style, and that's why I like Scorpion so much, because man, they could do some amazing effects, but it costs honor. Another people I know just like to attack, so they like Lion. So this game accommodates really different play styles, but you're still playing the same game.
Yeah,
and I'd like Trent to get into that a bit.
Yeah, my son, what he really enjoys about this game is setting up combos, basically.
Mm-hmm.
He's all into Phoenix, because that's what Phoenix is. It's all about like setting up ring synergies and stuff like that, and it's all about combos, and he loves that. And so it's like he gravitated right towards that clan. He's been with it ever since. I like basically. I tend to like the political aspect of the game, like you joke about the talk.
Yeah.
But that's actually the clan I gravitated to was Crane. They tend to, I mean, be really, really weak in terms of military conflicts, but they're really strong in political conflicts, and they're always like basically not more indirect backstabbing than the direct backstabbing of a Scorpion, I would say. The things they do are more like they have the most effective counterspell in the game. Like, just no, you're not doing that because I convinced someone ready to create.
Way of honor or something. Yeah. It's like, you have more honor than you. No, forget about it. And it's like, what?
And Crane's pretty good at accumulating honor. Lion and Crane are the two best at that.
Yeah.
So they often have the most honor, and it's just like, counter your thing. I don't know. I mean, they do. That's the kind of stuff they do. They're kind of tricksy in a different way. And I just have gravitated to them. Once you play through all the clans, you kind of find one or two that you kind of gravitate to because of their style.
Yeah.
Except for Unicorn.
Well, there's a person who plays Unicorn who does really well at it. So I know we're going to be talking about how we think Unicorn's broken, but that's another thing I like about this game is that you can go online, right? You can say like, okay, this is a deck that everyone has said is good, right? And you can just copy that deck. And you can pilot it to crap and still lose the game to a Unicorn clan who knows how to play that thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's really good. But I like the Scorpion. I like Scorpion. Crane, I like Crane a lot. Lion, I'm starting to get to. If you like doing combos, man, and Dragon is your thing because they're all about just throwing all kinds of crazy stuff on the character.
They're like taking a dude, putting him on the table, and then making that one guy just ridiculous.
Yeah, it's like Devastator from Transformers, right? Just build this big, giant, indestructible robot, and you're like, oh no.
You're building Exodia.
Yeah, and it's just one of the things that amazed me about the game is just like, dude, it accommodates so many different play styles, and that's also a detriment to it too, because you gotta like invest in all of it, right? Because it's a card game, but once you get into you find a clan you like, then you can really start digging into it. So we are at right now with this game. We're at the core set, right? We're at 6 packs of Dynasty cards right now in a clan, which is Phoenix, right?
Okay, so let's back up and explain what that is. The game came out originally with a core set. The core set had enough cards in it for you to build a rudimentary deck for each clan. It's not quite a full-size normal deck, but you can play with each clan out of the core set.
Mm-hmm.
Core set costs, I think the MSRP is $39.85. You can usually find it a fair amount cheaper than that if you look around. It's enough to give you a taste of a game. However, as Fantasy Flight likes to do things, to really build a good deck out of just the core sets, you need multiple core sets. That's just how they do their core sets. They try to go wide but not very deep with them, so they include one copy of a whole bunch of different cards in the core set, and you're allowed to have 3 copies of any individual card in a deck you build. So theoretically, you'd want 3 core sets if you're trying to build tournament decks. You don't need to do that if you just want to taste the game. Perfectly fine. A core set's a great way to taste it, but if you want to dig deep into the deck building, you're going to get a couple core sets. So the way they've expanded the game, this is a living card game. So you know what you're getting in every pack. Every expansion after that has a complete play set of every card in it, so you only ever have to buy one of them. The first thing they did is they brought out a cycle of cards, the Imperial Cycle. This was 6 packs of 20 unique cards each, 3 copies of each card. So each pack has 60 cards, 20 unique cards, 3 copies of each. 20 times 3 is 60. And there's 6 of those back in the cycle. Yep. So if you buy the whole cycle, that's 120 different cards, 3 copies of each, 360 cards. They're spread out amongst all the clans. Some packs are better for some clans than others. Completists that really into it go get all of them. But if you want to, again, you can just target the one that has good cards for your clan and kind of let the other one slide if that's how you want to play. Perfectly fine. They also have a clan pack, which is a pack that's mostly just Phoenix cards. They are theoretically eventually bringing out a clan pack for each faction, but the clan pack is like 150 cards, and most of them are for Phoenix. Phoenix is the only clan that has a clan pack thus far.
And then the rest of those cards were, from what I could gather looking on it, were like cards you could do to counter some of those Phoenix cards that were in there.
There's also a card for each clan that's basically a direct counter to some of the common Phoenix strategies. And that's where we're at now. The second cycle is supposed to start coming out late this month. So that'll be another series of 6 packs, 60 cards each, 20 copies of 3 cards in each pack. That cycle's coming out starting at the end of this month. They're doing a weird thing with this where they have these long gaps between releases, and then they release 6 packs once a week or 1 a week for 6 weeks. And then there's a long gap where there's nothing coming out.
Which has caused some unhappiness in this, because it's like you just get hit with everything, and then you have months of like, okay, I just got hit in the face with like 6 packs of all these cards, and I gotta like try to figure out how to work all this stuff. So it's a pretty big kick to the face. But you know, one of the complaints I've heard in the past about this living card game system is that it's once a month, so they just kind of piecemeal out things a little bit, and people are like want things immediately. So I guess they're trying to get that a bit. I find it a little destructive on the wallet, but it is what it is.
It kind of is what it is.
Yeah. It's like you build up a certain, I don't know, when they do it more spaced out, it's like, you know, you get a paycheck or something in between, and it's like, you know, you kind of have budgeted for it because, you know, it's just going to be once every now and then, but then it's like, for 6 months, I had an L5R budget of $0, and now it jumps to an L5R budget of, you got to have 3 sets, right? Or I guess no, you only need one.
One of them, but it's like 6 of them. They're like $15 a pop MSRP. You know?
So you're talking like $90.
Yeah, it's like holy cow.
To put that in context, that would be, if you buy the whole cycle for $90, you're essentially getting full play sets of like what would be a small Magic set.
Yeah.
So the full cycle is about the size of a small Magic set, and by that $90, you're getting full play sets of all the cards.
Yeah.
You never get any more.
And I mean, it's something that you can actually manage. That's what I really liked about the LCG model. Is just the way that, like, you know, you're not sitting there worrying about what's going to come out when. You know, there's a certain method to the madness.
And I just want to say, I heard a lot of complaints, and I agree. Buying 3 core sets, I mean, it's just like when I first getting into this, I'm like, I had to justify this to my wife. I'm like, I need another 2. How much are they? $40 a pop. You better really like this. I'm like, I think I do. I'm not sure yet. But after I bought the 3 core sets, now I remember in the past when I was looking at like Lord of the Rings, and you know, so you need 3 core sets, but that 3rd core set, you only need like 6 cards out of that 3rd core set, which happened to be Gandalf, right?
Yeah, basically you needed more Gandalfs.
Yeah, and I think Android, which may it rest in peace right now, that was kind of the same thing. But with this one, I was rather impressed that I only had duplicate cards. There wasn't that much. It was like a stack, but I was like, wow, compared to what this used to be.
And the best part is the dupes that you have in this are ones that you want to put in like every deck.
Yeah.
Like
so they actually did it like thoughtfully, because I mean, I think they tried to take a step in that direction with Game of Thrones, but I was still really disappointed in that distribution model. The thing is, like, there was like the Milk of the Poppy card, and you know, if you only wanted to keep X amount of decks built at any given time, like, I just kind of wrote the word Milk of the Poppy on a bunch of note cards and stuck that in my game box because I could just, that way, if I ever wanted to play a deck and didn't have the Milk of the Poppy card in that deck, I could just pull it from one that did and switch the note cards out.
So I think Fantasy Flight is getting a little better because Arkham Horror wasn't that bad too. You just needed 2 courses. There was a lot of waste in Arkham Horror, but still, it's only 2. And going into this, I was like, you know, it is what it is. It's still kind of rotten, but I can see they're trying to get better at it. And so far I can see with the 6x6 is, you know, they want to keep this thing going in a lap. They want to keep the meta going. They want to keep, you know, people playing. And if people want cards, then they're going to give it to them. So I'm okay with that to a large extent. Although I'm gonna have to piecemeal out my next Dynasty pack because tell you what, doing 2 living card games is not the cheapest thing in the world.
Especially since they're both in the middle of cycles, essentially. So,
and we still don't know if they're making big boxes to this.
No, I still think there's one coming to introduce Mantis Clan. I really, really, really do. I think there's going to be an 8th clan. I think it's coming, but they haven't announced it yet. I really thought they had a big announcement of the 2nd clan pack, which was Scorpion. I really thought that was going to be a Mantis set, and it wasn't. I was surprised.
I didn't think a lot of people think it was going to be Scorpion. When they announced Scorpion, like, what? Where's my unicorn? We got to fix unicorn.
Yeah, some people did definitely think that they were going to announce a unicorn pack. I really thought it was going to be like a big box set for Mantis.
So Scorpion is like the post core set faction?
No, Scorpion is the first clan pack that came out was for Phoenix. They just announced the 2nd one like a couple weeks ago, and it was for Scorpion. That surprised a lot of people because in the tournament results, Scorpion's like kind of dominating.
Oh yeah, well, and that was the same way they did with Game of Thrones, though. I feel like so much of that stuff. Yeah, it's like so much of that stuff as the die has been cast by the time that they finally like see how who's winning. It's like these cards are already in the pipe.
Okay, so we need to back up a little bit.
Let's go.
A little bit of history here. The reason so when they were testing this game, this is hearsay, but it's strongly believed hearsay, and it's been whispered by a lot of people, that when they were testing this game, they actually had overpower issues with Unicorn Clan when they were testing it. It was too strong. So very near the end, when they finally got down to publishing it, like they were like, Unicorn really has a problem. We have a problem with this clan. So they neutered a bunch of cards. Supposedly they like completely redid the clan champion, who's like supposedly their best card. They took off abilities on a bunch of cards. They amped up the cost of a few things. It was supposed to be oriented around pulling people in and out of conflicts. Like you could kind of like decide who was in, decide who was out on the fly rather than having to declare it all up front. They kind of just pulled that out, ripped that all out of Unicorn and left it without a real identity. And the clan is really weak. The way it actually got released, it's just getting drubbed in all the tournaments. It feels weak when you're playing it. I don't get Unicorn. I've tried playing it a bunch, and I don't understand what you're
I know. Again, when he showed me.
I use it for a splash, but just as a clan, it's very difficult.
Yeah, so a lot of people were expecting that the next clan pack, a lot of people thought the first clan pack was going to be Unicorn, but it's not, and the second one isn't either. And everybody's like, when's Unicorn going to get some help? Because it really needs it.
Well, this would make it a nice segue. So we've talked about, what's nice, so some of the negatives here. What are some of the issues you're seeing with the game as it stands now? We've already discussed Clan Unicorn about being a little weak. Is there any other aspects that give me think might be a hindrance to why people aren't playing it besides the initial buy-in to it?
I think the number one thing is the game length. I think that is hindering a lot of people. A typical game of this, when you're learning it, it takes when you're learning it, some of those games will take like an hour 15, an hour and a half to play this. Once you're familiar with playing it and you played it a few times, or if you're playing with an experienced player that's kind of guiding you through it, the time gets a lot less. My son and I can rip off games in 30 minutes. But again, that's still longer than a game of Magic. It's longer than most games of Netrunner. They're longer games. The game is designed to be longer because it just has such an abundance of decision points.
Yeah, and if you got two players who know the deck they built and they know the deck they're playing against, I've seen a crab play a lion and it lasted like almost 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, and those are experienced people playing the game. So yeah, game length it's a long game. It can be.
Yeah, but the thing is, in its favor, I often feel like most of the time, not always, but more so than almost any other game like this I played, other than arguably Netrunner. I have very strong positive feelings about Netrunner, other than a few quibbles, but I feel like this game, you win or lose it based on the cards that are on the table and the cards that are in your hand and the misplays you make.
Yeah, the misplays.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many decision points, and when you reflect on a game, sure, there are going to be occasional games where the draw just really went horrible for you. But most of the time, if you really look back and reconsider your game, you probably made a number of mistakes that cost you this game. And that's really what it comes down to. the card draw is important, don't get me wrong. In all these games, it always is. But almost more so than any other game I played, the sheer number of decision points, the amount of decisions that you can just mess up, puts it on you for the blame. And I think that's actually, for some people, that's a big positive, and for some, I think it's a negative.
Sure. Could I comment for a minute about? Sure. So Trent, I don't know. Like when you taught me how to play this game, which by the way, Trent did an excellent job. I would say textbook for anybody who's trying to get somebody else like familiar with and to play a game where Trent has played this game. What would you say, Trent? Maybe 50 times, and that's conservative estimate.
That's conservative. That's definitely conservative.
Okay. I mean, I didn't want to like say something ridiculous, but you could have played this game now 100, 200 plus games. Depends on whether or not you're playing, how much you're playing at home and how much you're playing this. You know, there's probably like games, those like services that are like online where you can play with other people.
There's a service online you can play it.
Okay. Well, I would say that what you did was great, and that was having his son build a deck so that Trent didn't just know what was in it for me. So his son actually built a deck, and I had to sort of figure it out as I was going. But it was cool because I had this opportunity to play a deck that was, you know, not exactly built, you know, by the guy who's teaching me, so that he's either wearing gloves or he's punching me bare-fisted, just crushing my skull. And so that was interesting. And also Trent played Unicorn, which was kind of like that sort of, you know, knew that he had a bunch of things stacked against him. So I think, you know, he put himself in a position where even though he was able to make challenging, you know, like make decisions, he was at a big disadvantage. It was like playing with a handicap. So well done, you know, kudos to you, Trent. And I thought that was really cool. The thing is, though, in my one game, I noticed a lot of similarities to Game of Thrones, the card game. Like I've only like know a little bit about Netrunner, but it doesn't seem like this would be that similar to Netrunner.
The attacking the provinces is the part that feels like Netrunner.
Oh, that's right. No, it is. It's almost like mixing Game of Thrones and Netrunner.
Yeah, but that part really, the whole declaration of the attack against the province.
And then you like flip it over, and it's like
that is so Netrunner. But it feels so much like Netrunner.
But everything that you're going to flip over in those provinces is bad. Like it's not like you're going to flip something over and be like, aha, I found it. It's like you're going to flip it over and it's going to be some sort of a bad effect. It's whether or not your opponent chose the right bad effect prior to the game, you know, for whatever matchup they're in, if they're in that position. So, you know, like that still is a decision point here, though, whereas in Netrunner, it's like you don't want to go here, but you do want to go here. Everything kind of sucks, and you'll eventually be flipping over everything in Legend of Five Rings. But here's the biggest thing. Like almost all of these games, Magic, every pre-constructed deck game, Magic, Game of Thrones, even like the cooperative ones, like Lord of the Rings and Arkham Horror, you've almost always got like this balance of sort of your utility cards and your like sort of number cards. I want to call them numbers because people a lot of times will call them by they're like a 1/1 where they're, you know, they have like a 1 hit point and they deal 1 damage. Tokens, you know, you might say. And so you've got characters that actually go down in front of you and take up space and are like your sort of defense system versus effect cards. L5R divorces those into 2 separate decks so that you're guaranteed to have a distribution of characters that's going to be at least X amount per turn. So you're never going to look at a hand like you do in Magic all the time and be like, I've got these great cards and I don't have the lands to be able to play them, right? I'm just not drawing lands. And in Game of Thrones, you have the same issue. Like, you know, you look at your hands and it's like, I don't have any characters. Or the only character I have is a big character. And with the types of card effects in this game, if I can't play that big character with at least one other character, you're just going to wipe my board. You know, and I'm going to be out so much. So you don't end up with those situations here in L5R because the distribution is like baked into the actual system itself. That also drives the length of the game, though, because you don't have these like, you know, oh, this game was just decided right when it came out. And I think we're seeing that just, you know, like this is the direction that Fantasy Flight is headed. So thanks, guys, for giving me a few seconds here, you know, just to give my 2 cents and apply that. But I agree, Trent, that like, you know, the decisions are what come through. And I think those are just a couple of the tools that Fantasy Flight has used to make that happen.
Yeah, I think more than any other game I've ever played, nothing you do in this game on its own is a big pendulum shift. It's a bunch of little things that add up to winning the game. It's never like you don't play this one thing that just hammers everything. That happens in everything I've ever played other than this. Even Netrunner to an extent had that. But this one really, I mean, there's no individual card that's just like, I just won the game, other than, you know, the final thing that finally knocks over their stronghold or something.
Yeah,
but
once
that's
the
on the
game's
back
over.
of a lot of other things you've done up to that point.
In almost always, you're probably sitting there playing your cards, hoping that you can hang. You know, whoever defends that was sitting there hoping that they had enough to defend that onslaught coming at them. So it's even like, I mean, even that decision is one that you're going to have other things, like the tempo of the game has dictated and led you to that point.
Yeah, and I'm not saying other games don't have a lot of decisions. They definitely do. Almost every LCG and CCG I've ever played is packed full of decisions. The difference I'm saying here is, there are times in those other games where it feels like one thing going wrong can swing the pendulum huge in one direction. Or like you're playing Magic, you don't get lands, the pendulum just swings away from you and there's nothing you can do about it. Or someone plays the one key card that just hammers everything your deck's doing and there's nothing you can do about it and you're done.
Yeah.
That happens a lot in Magic. Magic is really bad at that, in my opinion. That's one of the bad things about Magic. Other LCGs from Fantasy Flight mitigate that to an extent. It's not as bad as Magic, but it's still there. I think up to L5R, Netrunner did the best job of it, but I think L5R is even a step beyond that, where it's all about on the table. Like, that's the most important thing. There are certainly powerful cards, but there are so many decision points on the table, it's up to you to mess things up.
Yeah, but that's also a part of the, I mean, it's a good decision they did that, but the trade-off for that is that you're going to be spending a lot of time constructing decks, because now you're essentially building 2 decks, and each one is like 40 cards, 40 to 45, and even in one of them you can even splash with another clan. We haven't getting into that part. Your conflict deck, you can just put another clan in there. So there is if I had to describe this game in one word, it'd probably be exhausting. Because there is like, after a game of L5R, I'm like, whoa, right? I need to decompress from that. And then even just building decks in this is unlike anything I ever have seen. I mean, after building decks for L5R, building decks in Arkham Horror is like nothing now, right? I'm like really good at building Arkham Horror decks after trying to wrap my head around this thing. But there is a depth to this game that I have not seen, and possibly, exception of other collectible card games, but it's just it can be a freaking rabbit hole. With 6 clans you can just start doing things with. It's just oh my goodness, you could just, this is the definition of a lifestyle game if you really want to just write this thing down.
The rabbit hole is deep, and I will say, more than any of these games I've ever played like this, finding a clan that matches your playstyle and playing a deck that you know to death is the best way to be good at this game. Going online and deck decking is a good place to start, but if you actually want to do well, you're much better off just getting a deck and knowing it cold.
Yeah, and you also got it. And another big part of playing this game well is playing against the other clans, because a huge part of this game is being able to recognize what your opponent is going to be possibly throwing out at you. And if you have, in most decks, they have 3 copies of a card. So if you start seeing stuff, you got to be able to recognize what he's going to be able to throw at you and how to counter it, and on the fly, because you're like, okay, this is what I got. This is what I built. This is what he's doing. How can I counter what this guy's that I know is coming my way? And the only way you do that is by playing it again and again and again. And the good news about that is that Fantasy Flight is committed to this game. There are tournaments out there. There are kits. There are stronghold kits. If you can find a place in your area that supports this game, you will find passionate, dedicated players. And for the most part, I'm not saying this is entirely true, but for the most part, people who play this game are really open. They explain it, and they're very accommodating, because they know that most of these people I've noticed are kind of recovering Magic addicts as it is, and they don't really want this thing to be as vicious as that is, and they want you to enjoy the game. So
yeah,
as deep as this game is and as much money you're going to be throwing at it, they are supporting it, and there are people who are very passionate about it. And I've not really seen that except for like splatter games and games of that ilk. You know, it's like, it's kind of refreshing to see, you know, oh, here's another group of people who are passionate about their stuff, who are actually, they're vicious, but they're kind of nice too, you know. What else should we talk about here, Trent? Have we hit most anything? Is there anything you want to hit on?
No. The cards are, I'll say the art in this game is fantastic. The art in this game is utterly gorgeous. 90% of the pieces in this game are just they've done a really excellent job with the art, I feel. And the card frame layouts convey the feeling of the game. Like it's Eastern themed, but it's its own world, is the way I would describe Rokugan. I think that all just comes together really well.
Yeah, the artwork, I mean, the cards are beautiful. I love the artwork in this. Even like another thing that's really impressive is that if you have a question about a keyword or an effect, you can usually find it. One of the things initially people didn't like about this is when you bought the core set, that didn't come with the rule book, right? It came with the how to play, but there was like no rules reference. And they specifically said, look, this is a living card game. The rules are going to adjust. Here's where you can print out online and get ready, because we're going to know people are going to play the crap out of this thing and find things wrong. In fact, they just released a restricted list. And honestly, it wasn't that bad. I was expecting the way Reddit was going at it. I'm like, oh my goodness, it's going to be some big thing that's going to break the back of the game. But it really wasn't. I was really impressed about how concise that was.
Yeah, what they did was, like, other than how other games handle a restricted list, they basically have a list of 7 cards. You could choose one of them, and you can play it as normal, 3 copies. And then that means once you've chosen one, the other ones on the list are all banned for you.
Yeah.
The thing is, there's only like 1 card per clan that's really banned or really on that list. So generally what it comes down to is you're choosing between either the card in your clan or a couple key neutral cards, and you're just choosing between them. It's really not that big of an impact. No, I will say my son was frustrated because 2 of his key cards from his Phoenix deck were on that list. Charge, and then the normal Phoenix clan card that got on there. He uses Charge for everything, and that's also restricted, and he has grumbled a bit about this. But I mean, he's okay with it. I don't think it really set his deck back that much. Well, he went with Charge, by the way. That's the one he's keeping.
Well, you can tell him that my Scorpion deck was hit pretty hard too. So I have to find out a different combination of rotten things I'm going to do. So yeah, well, I feel his pain.
I told him about all these changes. I said, you're going to have to choose between these. But he actually had to take out 2 cards, I think, if I remember right. Because I think he had 3 cards that were restricted, but there was only 2 he really cared about. And then so like he does all this and he makes his changes. He's like, well, what happened to your Crane deck? And I said, no changes.
Yeah. What about your Lion deck? Nope.
He wasn't really amused by that very much. He thought that was.
So how do you feel about the future of the game, Trent? How do you think about where the direction they're taking this from what you've seen, and how do you feel about the sustainability of this particular living card game?
I think it's going to be. I think the people that are in it are going to stick in it. I don't think it's going to have people gradually dropping at nearly the same rate as some of the other LCGs. I think the people that are in it right now are going to stick. I really do. They're very, very passionate. I've seen some incredible passion from people in the community. It just kind of blows my mind. I think that because of the complexity of the game, like I think that there's probably an upper cap on how big it could ever be. I think some people just don't want that many. Like you said, you feel exhausted sometimes at the end of a game of this. And I mean, for some people, that's not an appeal. But for people that are into that kind of thing, it is an appeal. I think that I expect L5R to attract people that are going away from Netrunner because it just went out. I think a lot of those people are going to jump to L5R because I think that's the closest one.
Do you think that maybe some of those people need a background in something like Netrunner? Because Netrunner, if I understand correctly, because I did not play the game, and nor did I really pay attention to the community.
I just want to mention something about Netrunner real quick. Jeff Gamble did an episode on Netrunner about 4 or 5 years ago, and I was the guest on that one.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry your game went away.
It was something that I referenced actually in the show notes. Okay. So yeah, anybody who's downloads it from online will get that when they download it from the iTunes. But yeah, I guess I'd forgotten that we didn't actually mention that yet. But yeah, you certainly mentioned your love of Netrunner before. The question I have though is Netrunner had a pretty palatable play time. Had it packed a lot of decisions in, but also wasn't much longer than a game of say like Magic. Did Fantasy Flight throw out any hope to appeal to casual gamers in pursuit of more core folks for L5R?
Yeah, I think that their game targeting casual gamers is Star Wars Destiny right now.
Okay.
I think that is the one that's targeting the more light people that would be in a more Magic type game. Destiny is collectible, but it is really not driven by the super. There are a couple cards per set that are like super rare and people want them. But you can build a very good deck in Destiny for pretty cheap. I mean, like 10 or 15. I mean, there are several good decks you can build very cheap. It's done good in terms of that, but the collectible model. Okay. It is collectible, but they aren't just top loading all the rares as being the good ones. They're not. Go ahead.
Do you think that Legend of the Five Rings is simply a stepping stone for Fantasy Flight when you look back and see that Android Netrunner 2nd edition adopted so many positive changes that you saw first in L5R, and now it's my favorite, and L5R, you can be my ex-girl. We're still friends and all, but it's like, we're not going to hang out that much anymore.
Okay, first of all, I want to say that the 2nd edition of Netrunner is not happening because Wizards of the Coast took back the license.
Yeah, and just for the record, you don't have to worry about L5R is owned by Fantasy Flight, so you don't have to worry about pulling a Netrunner.
Yeah, everything about L5R is owned by Fantasy Flight. Some of the mechanisms of Netrunner, many of them, were owned by Wizards of the Coast. Wizards of the Coast licensed those mechanisms to Fantasy Flight for 6 years. And Fantasy Flight completely expected it would be just a completely automatic renewal, and it was not. Wizards of the Coast basically wouldn't even talk to them. So Android Netrunner is done, and I mean done. There's going to be no 2nd edition, which is disappointing to me, but...
Yeah, but Fantasy Flight has also been taking some really interesting directions with the LCGs lately. I mean, you got Arkham Horror, which did something. I mean, Arkham Horror threw my wife back into constructing decks. They took, I mean, with this L5R, they really made a really heavy card game out of this. And, I like seeing where they're going with this design. I'm curious to see what their next LCG is going to be. I mean,
I think they're going to be, they've got 2 co-ops. If we're going to talk about the future of LCGs, I actually have a couple predictions there.
Okay.
I think they're going to have, I think the next ones they're going to do for a while are going to be completely Fantasy Flight IPs. They're not going to do any license crap anymore. With
Not
after Games Workshop and Wizards of the Coast.
Games Workshop ripped away Warhammer Invasion and Warhammer 40K Conquest from them. And Wizards of the Coast just ripped Netrunner from them. They're not going to do anything that is not completely in-house, I think, ever again for an LCG. I think that's done.
I agree. Yeah.
So what I think they're going to do is I think they're going to have one game that's actually kind of quick. I don't think they're going to do another co-op for a while unless they kill off Lord of the Rings and do a Lord of the Rings 2nd edition or something. I don't think they're going to do another new co-op. I think they're going to do 2 types of games. They're going to be the next 2 they release. One of them is going to be a very quick type of game. It's going to be short, targeting the people that like to play like ordinary Magic and stuff like that. I think it's going to be short, 15, 20-minute play, that type of game.
Kind of to collect the people who maybe, the Android Netrunner who are intimidated by the Android Netrunner crowd that just wants it to stay kind of that sort of...
Who don't want an hour-and-a-half card game, yeah.
And I also think they are going to release another one that's in the hour-and-a-half card game thing, but they're going to go a different direction with it. And I've been saying this for a while, and it may be related to a hint I've gotten in the past, but I think they're going to release an LCG based on Twilight Imperium's universe, and it's going to be like an epic space conflict game, and it's going to be like, I think what I feel like they're going for is like Commander, Magic the Gathering Commander, where you have like 100-card deck, and everything in it's a one-of card, and the whole point of it is to build wacky, different, goofy decks. And I think that's where they're going to go with it. It's going to be like this big epic type game, and it's going to be a Twilight Imperium LCG. I really have a feeling that's what's coming.
Well, there is that Commander market, that's certainly evolved. That is just such a unique and eclectic mix of people that are really. It's like where Magic the Gathering is meeting the tabletop, just general board gaming, with like elements of diplomacy and anyway, yeah. There's
I think that if you think about Commander and you think about Fantasy Flight's IPs, I think Twilight Imperium by far is the best match for it. And I have a feeling they're going to make something that shoots for the Commander type player.
Well, either that was in the pipes, Trent, or they just listened to this episode and took some notes.
I'll tell you what, I'd love to have a Space Turtle deck. I would love to have a Space Turtle deck.
I'm pointing out that I'm not like suggesting anything to Fantasy Flight. That's pure prediction. But that my gut tells me that they're going to make something that's targeting the Commander type player that likes to build the big goofy decks. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Wizards likes to talk about different player styles, and I think they'd be targeting someone that's like the Johnny combo player. Mm-hmm. Not someone that's like the super competitive, narrow it down. The person that likes to build combos and bring out big things.
Not the spike.
Yeah, not the spike. I think they're going to intentionally bring out kind of an epic game that's intentionally aiming for those players.
It excludes the spike, because spike always ends up being the person that sort of, like your Timmy and your Johnny or whatever they are, the other two, like they tend to be fairly, symbiotic in their relationship, where they can both each enjoy, certain things, because neither of them in the end is caring about the bottom line. And, that's when the trophies and whatnot come out. That's when everybody who feels like I built a deck because I wanted to have fun and it's not a winner and I suck and I'm a loser.
So what I think they'll do is they'll aim for, I think the format of Magic that does that the best is Commander.
Yeah.
In terms of like keeping it away from the spikes. I mean, spikes do play Commander and they do kind of sometimes whittle down the format, but I've witnessed many times people bring in the spikiest spike Commander deck they can and lose to some Johnny combo player playing some wacky combo, because that's how Commander works.
Yeah, you're not like your image to the table and how good you're doing, and also like how intense you are about the game and how much other players trust you is important elements that you can't just build out of your deck. You've got to have players that can trust that you're not the best target or the most important person to make sure doesn't win.
Exactly. And so now, Joe, now that you've played Twilight Imperium, do you see why I'm connecting this to the Twilight Imperium universe?
Oh, I certainly do. Yeah,
that's where I see it going.
Yeah, you got the crazy trees, you got viruses. Yeah, I can see
space lions, space lions.
Yeah, turtles.
And there's a lot of universe there to build off of, and there really isn't. There's not a science fiction. Now that Netrunner's gone, there's no like science fiction, and that sort of inhabits that sphere as well.
Yeah, they have 4 LCGs right now that are alive, and that's the least they've had since like 2011.
Yeah. How do you feel? Speaking of, how do you think the multiplayer is going to play out on this? Because they announced the beta. They're taking feedback from the beta. I haven't had a chance to try out the multiplayer.
I really want to try the multiplayer. It looks really interesting to me. I'm hoping to get some local people together to actually sit down and play about a 4-player game of the multiplayer, because it looks like fun to me. It looks like they're trying to shape the L5R rules into being something a little Commander-ish, but the problem is the decks are going to be very spiky. I don't really know how it's going to go, but I like the rules that they did.
I was thinking, now there is a little bit that Fantasy Flight has covered that Commander aspect with the melee variant in Game of Thrones. So maybe they can push in that direction here too. But
if you're feeling like you played Game of Thrones and you like the melee format, that's a lot what the L5R multiplayer is like. It has a lot of similarities with the melee format.
Okay.
So before we wrap this up, Joe is our first-time player, right? And I have been, ever since a few weeks ago, Trent, you're like, you should ask Joe what he just played. I have been very curious what your initial impressions of L5R are, and if it's something, if it's something you would want to pursue, or it's just like, it's just too much for me. I can't afford it. I'm just gonna like push this aside and you guys enjoy it. So because I had my own, when I first played it, I had my own initial impressions of it, and I was just like getting hit by a truck basically. But I'm curious what you feel about it as a first time player. Would you recommend it, and where do you see yourself with this game?
I think that right now I'm, with Game of Thrones, I think of living card games as like stretchy waisted pants.
Okay, yoga pants.
And it's because it's, you end up gaining a lot and stretching out your pants when you're, like on the when you're hooked up to the system, and when you're just buying things, and like with Game of Thrones, that hit together at a time for me where there was a lot of people in our local community that were all pushing for it, that were all very influential, and that I like saw playing the game a lot more. And it wasn't just that though. It wasn't just that, because I've got that coming from Trent, right? And I've got that coming from UTC. Mm-hmm. But I also got super taken away with Game of Thrones. Like I actually read the series, right? And that like that was so many, like I read like 5,000 pages in like 2 months.
Wow.
It was how I made it through the like one of the coldest summers that I've ever lived through. It was just like, it's just that the summer, or not a summer, sorry, the coldest winters I've ever lived through. And that just melted away. Like the time melted away when I was reading Game of Thrones, and then the game did such a great job of doing service to that. I'm not that interested in the theme of this. I don't think we mentioned it yet, but like I guess a little bit of the chats that specifically on that were happening on some online forums, like one for Shut Up and Sit Down, that was very civil and very had a lot of people sharing viewpoints without just trying to condemn and get out their pitchforks. But like the world of Rokugan, or however you say it, is a little bit like a cultural appropriated Asian. Like it's anything from a Western perspective, anything in this game seems like it goes together because we don't get the subtle differences. And whereas like, imagine if you're like sort of Romani or Jewish people were being grouped together as being a part of like, a German army or something. If you saw their artwork in with it, and they might be that same sort of like feeling of like, Chinese people have spoken out and said like this game is taking Japanese and Chinese and Korean and just anything Asian and just kind of slapping it all together. And that's not like we're distinct groups, even though you don't see us as such. And so I think that like maybe a little bit is that like I feel like that makes the theme of this game a little more generic for my personal tastes, if that makes any sense. Like I'm not saying that like it's wrong that it exists. That's not my call to make. I'm not from the affected group. I'm not going to make the call, but it just makes it seem like a little bit more generic. Like this is kind of your dime store Asian theme, as opposed to something that's like really based on like an intellectual property that is maybe actually Asian and actually like just goes full into like, this is a game that just takes the Seven Samurai and builds a world around it or something, as opposed to like, this is all the Asian stuff that you can imagine being thrown in. And I think the biggest bit of contention was like the use of the word bonsai and the way that it was depicted on the card as like a specific, it has two different meanings, like in Chinese and in Japanese, it means two totally different things. And people are trying to say like, oh, well, it's the Chinese meaning of it because it just means like 100 years. But it's like the picture on the card was like of a bunch of people, in a war cry, which would be the Japanese meaning of the word, which the Japanese, like in World War II, did quite a few kind of human rights abuses towards Chinese folks that they were like, essentially, kind of like the, kind of a colonists of sorts. I don't even know how I would describe that relationship. But anyway, so there's those things. And really when it comes down to it though, none of those things are the bottom line. They'd both be enough for me to get over. But the biggest hump is just like the fact that I don't play two-player games. I wouldn't be able to play this game with my wife. That's who I generally play two-player games with. I find that when I'm at a game night, it's always like, public game night. That's not how this game gets played. You say like, hey, do you want to get together and play L5R? And, there's just, I would love to play this game. I would love to keep going with it, but it is such a huge ticket. And I have to buy it all, and I have to go all or nothing. And it's just like, I know what it feels like to go all. My stretchy pants are still stretched out, right? They're still stretched out, and they ain't going to fit anytime soon. And, the game has to go to a certain point. I have to go to a certain point to where I can actually even fit back into them. And I don't mean to say that, like, I feel like a better person without it, because I don't. Like, I love playing these games. It's just like the sort of way of life that you end up adopting when you're on an LCG. Like especially people who don't jump on with you, it makes it very weird environments where like, you'll have game nights, if you try to play at a game night, your other friends, like they're just kind of excluded. And there's a sort of element of exclusivity that gives another additional barrier just to the LCG market. I don't think that's as present in the co-ops, but you asked a question here, TC, and I kind of just let the dam burst, but that's what we love about you, Joe.
And to be honest, in my situation, if I had to choose one LCG, it would, which way I'm going to swim, because it's the one I play with my wife, you know. But right now, I like both of them, and they both feel different. They're different play styles and what. But I definitely get having to, and then it's going to a game night where people are playing L5R. If you're not into it, you can't just go like, hey, let me play your deck. You're going to be the person that gets crushed all night long. right? You have to get into it. You have to explore the system. It's very rewarding, but it can also be very limiting. I get that. How do you feel about that, Trent?
I'd agree with that. I would think I had to step away for just a moment. I missed part of that conversation, but I would agree generally with what I heard TC saying there at the end.
Okay, yeah, Joe was just saying his stretchy pants, and how
the stretchy pants analogy does make sense. I understood that. I mean, I also got very into L5R, and I stuck with it a little bit longer than Joe, and it ran into
Thrones, I think you mean.
Yeah, Game of Thrones, but it ran into the same issue I had with the Netrunner. That they reached a point where they released a couple broken combos, and that really turned me off of those games. I worry that will happen at some point with L5R, but I think that the game is so rich in decision points that it will never be quite as bad.
The system is a lot more resilient to that type of impact.
I think that it's more resilient to this than Netrunner was, and also Game of Thrones was. Game of Thrones, yeah.
Well, it sounds like we definitely need to revisit this in about a year and see where we stand again. Do a longer view longer view of because I think that'd be something worth revisiting. So we get to see where we're at right now, and then when we in the future, this is what we said then, and now we're at this. Yeah, it'd be really neat to reevaluate, because that's the huge thing about LCGs is they're constantly moving. It's not the same game as it was a year ago. It's trying to do so. I think it'd be worthwhile revisiting LCG in the future.
Just to go off of that, TC, people are constantly changing and sometimes dropping off. The things that we're drawing. You had mentioned that you used to bring your daughter to L5R tournaments, and she's kind of decided that for her, she gets that sort of feeling of this system, but not necessarily in the pre-constructed deck format.
Yeah, her passion for this game was the setting. She likes she likes that. She likes it, and she likes role playing. So and she still likes it. It's just she likes going this way with it. And maybe that was a wise choice.
It's definitely a core gamer type game, and she's trying to experience it from a more casual perspective, is what it sounds like.
So okay, final thoughts on L5R. Trent, go.
It's a great LCG to jump into because it's still pretty early in its life cycle. If games with lots of decision points appeal to you, then this is a good game for you.
And Joe, final thoughts on L5R.
In a perfect world, I have this game because there's great decisions to be made. There's excellent design going on in it. It's very well put together. They listen to their community and do, and I think they learn lessons. The Fantasy Flight studio has learned a lot of lessons. You'll see the fruits of that show up in L5R. I'm personally, I would love to play another game or two here or there as just maybe the special episode every now and then. But I'm not going to be, I'm not going to be joining the repeating cast members of L5R.
Okay. Hey, you guys know where I stand. I think it's a pretty decent game. I am very curious where this game's going in the future, so we'll keep you guys posted. So that concludes our episode of Legend of the Farms. Thank you so much, Trent, for being on. I love talking to you every week anyway, but I really enjoy talking to you about this game because I know it's something we like to talk about even before we go on the air with the good, the bored, and the ugly. We're we did all this stuff. So thank you very much for volunteering to be on this episode.
Quite happy to do it.
And Joe,
great job. Yeah, it's great talking with you.
And Joe, thanks for listening to me and giving me moral support. It's always important.
Oh, shucks, TC.
Oh, you're the best.
I know.
So until
it's great to be here.
Until our next episode, we'll talk to you later.